Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us for this live taping of the 200th episode of the Rhode Island Report. I am Pam Johnston, President and CEO of Rhode Island PBS and the Public's Radio. We are incredibly proud of this milestone moment and of the important collaboration between the Boston Globe and Rhode Island Public Media. Clear-eyed, courageous, distinctive local journalism, like the Rhode Island Report, has never mattered more. But as we celebrate tonight, Rhode Island PBS, the Public's Radio, and all of public media is facing a real and growing threat. The White House is expected to propose eliminating all federal funding for public media as soon as this week. The impact of that loss will be felt both nationally and certainly here at home. So your presence here tonight means more than ever. Thank you for showing up, for listening, for tuning in, and for standing with us in support of local journalism that both serves and tells the stories of this remarkable place we are all so lucky to call home. A special thank you tonight to Senator Reed and Congressman Amo for being here with us and for their steadfast commitment to protecting public media and ensuring that Rhode Islanders continue to have access to trusted, credible, independent news. Here's to tonight's big milestone and to the essential work ahead. And with that, it is my pleasure to hand it off to Ed Fitzpatrick and Jim Hummel. Thank you so much.
From the Boston Globe, this is Rhode Island Report. I'm Ed Fitzpatrick. Welcome back to the podcast where we bring you big conversations from our very small state. Today, we have a very special episode. We're celebrating the 200th episode of the podcast and our partnership with Rhode Island PBS, with a taping in front of a live studio audience. I'm joined by Jim Hummel, host of A Lively Experiment on Rhode Island PBS.
Together, we're going to talk to Senator Jack Reed and U.S. Representative Gabe Amo about the decisions being made in Washington, D.C. and the impact they are having right here in Rhode Island.
Senator Reed, Representative Amo, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks for having us.
So 91 days have passed since Donald Trump took office again as president. Since then, we've seen countless headlines on DOGE cuts, deportations, tariffs, even Greenland. So I want to borrow a phrase from my fellow host Jim Hummel here and ask, what has outraged you the most, beginning with Senator Reed?
Well, what has outraged me the most has been the complete disregard for the law and the Constitution of the United States by President Trump. From his first day, he fired all the inspector generals. That, under the law, would require 30 days' notice to Congress and cause. He ignored that. And one of the things you're going to do if you intend to disregard the law is you get rid of the inspector generals, because their job is to see that the law is faithfully enforced. And that, together with his rather erratic economic policies, have put us in a position where our institutions are being challenged, our markets are challenged, and we're in a situation in the world where we're alienating our friends and embracing adversaries like Russia. So this is a formula for disaster, and we're trying our best to convince our Republican colleagues in the Senate and the House that this is no way to run a government, and they have to step up.
Representative Amos, same question.
Well, look, my answer is complementary to the senators. I believe that the abdication of responsibility from our Republican colleagues in the House and the Senate to wholesale say, as a branch of government, you know what, whatever you want, President Trump, helping him fulfill his aspirations of being a king. They, time and time again, have let the executive branch run roughshod over responsibilities that belong to us in Congress. Moreover, the heartlessness that we've seen, whether it's the slashing of jobs at the USDA, at the FDA, at the Nuclear Security Administration, all of these things that put us at greater threat, they bear some responsibility on top of that. The fracturing of our alliances around the world. The thing that makes America great is that our alliances are built on trust. And frankly, no one in the world trusts us anymore. And that's because our Republican colleagues have said, we're going to defer to the authoritarian who is aspiring to make everybody around the world come to his doorstep and beg. That's a shame.
To follow up on that, thousands of people marched through the streets of Providence on April 5th as part of the hands-off protest seen nationwide. They, too, were outraged, but they were also demanding action. So beyond strongly worded letters, what have you done and what can you do, since Democrats don't have a majority in the House or the Senate? Representative Amo, did you attend that protest?
Yes, I was in the crowd, and I decided very intentionally to go and be in allyship with people, but not seek any particular attention, because we have to do this together. I've been at protests at a lot of the alphabet soup of agencies, at the USAID, at the Treasury, at the CFPB, at NOAA. Not many people know where that is, but I've been there on that doorstep. And yes, those sharply worded letters are part of the strategy, but we also have to think broadly. We have to deploy our voices around the state, around certainly my congressional district, around the country. We also have to find the courage deep within the bellies of some of our Republican colleagues who are at home over these last few weeks to say, enough is enough. That's why a lot of them are hiding. They don't want to do town halls. In fact, a Republican campaign leader said, don't do town halls.
Senator Reed, will you be trying to top Senator Cory Booker's 25-hour speech on the Senate floor?
Yes, and I will do it upside down on my hands. No, Cory is an extraordinarily talented gentleman, and it was an impressive feat, not just because of the time, but because he really rallied the country with his observations about what was going wrong and what we have to do to put it right. And he gave us a real bounce, frankly, and we've now hopefully can move forward even with more effectiveness to curtail what the administration is trying to do.
What more can you do? What actions can you take?
Well, what we're trying to do is, first of all, to head off the cuts that would be catastrophic to Medicaid. It would essentially ruin the healthcare system, not just in Rhode Island, but across the country. We're focusing on that because they intend in the reconciliation process to use it to pay for the big tax cuts, and mostly to wealthy Americans. That's something we're focusing on because Medicaid is in red states as well as blue states. And some of my colleagues, and I think some of Gabe's colleagues, are getting a little nervous about denying health care to people, and not just poor people, but to a whole range of people.
Senator, one of your Republican colleagues, Lisa Murkowski, moderate from Alaska, I think she said the quiet part out loud a week ago at a town hall that a lot of the Republicans are scared. They're afraid of taking on Trump directly. You forged 30 years of relationships in the Senate. Mm-hmm. You're one of the longest serving members. You've had the private discussions and you've had to bring people into coalitions. What are those private discussions that you're having with your Republican colleagues now? What are they telling you?
Well, first, people like Lisa and many times Susan Collins and others take tough votes. They are people who are quite effective. The rest of the crowd, it's divided, I would say, in two categories. The MAGA people who got, pulled in on the coattails of Trump. Those are the newer members. And then some who've been around for at least one or two terms, and they're nervous, but they've not yet decided they can break with the president. One reason is because the scale of intimidation that Trump uses is beyond anything I've seen before. It is not only Elon Musk jumping up and down and say, I'm going to put $1 million against you in a primary. It's intimidation of, we're going to let this bad news about you get out. It's also, because of this dark web and all of the social media out there, some of my colleagues have threats against them.
We're not even 100 days in, and we get this fire hose of news every day from the Trump administration. How extreme does it have to get? I'm not talking to the newer people, but the people you served with 10, 20, 30 years. How extreme does it have to get for them to say enough?
I think one of the benchmarks will be the Supreme Court's action. I would hope that they would be in a position never to accept a president who would attempt to defy the Supreme Court. And that would be the point at which these reasonable Republicans come over and say, we have to stop this.
Representative Amo, when you were elected, Washington was a lot different. President Biden was the president. Is this what you signed up for?
Look, Harry Truman said, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. And I'm putting my hand on the oven because the people of the 1st Congressional District want that. They want a rigorous defense of Medicaid, of SNAP benefits. Just today, thinking about the work that matters here, I went to a food pantry. I went to a community center, the West End Community Center, and saw directly those services being higher in demand because of this arbitrary tariff regime that is raising prices for people in the state and across this country. And so, you know, I signed up for the hard days, not the easy ones.
Are you still having fun?
Look, fun is a weird way to put it. But every day I'm challenged.
Are you having fun right now?
Of course, with you.
Right.
But I would say this. I wake up every morning like many of my colleagues across the country, just like our great delegation, Senator Reed, Senator Whitehouse, and Congressman Magaziner, and think about what we can do to help Rhode Islanders. And as someone who is in this position because of the generosity of spirit in this state, son of 2 West African immigrants, to be in Congress, I'm honored every single day.
So now I want to address something in the headlines the last few days. The New York Times reports that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth again shared sensitive information about military operations in Yemen in a private chat on the Signal app. And NPR reports the White House has begun looking for someone to replace Hegseth. Senator, you're the ranking Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee. Why did you oppose Hegseth's nomination as Defense Secretary, and do you think he should resign now?
I don't think he should be confirmed. That's why I worked so hard to prevent his confirmation. And we were very close. It took the vice president to break the tie. I believe the first or second time in the history of the government that a vice president had to do that for a cabinet officer. We dug in, we fought hard, and I said it right up front. He doesn't have the experience, he doesn't have the temperament, and frankly, I don't think he has the character to lead the Department of Defense. It takes all those qualities, plus operational knowledge, plus the ability to manage a huge organization. He has none of those things. His management skills were tested when he ran a veterans association, which essentially went bankrupt under his leadership. And I think one of the things about him that I've observed is that he works in this circle of very close cronies, including, by the way, his wife, who's constantly with him, even in secret meetings and even on that Signal chat, which is completely inappropriate. So you've got someone that just doesn't have the skills necessary, and I tried to convince my colleagues, and I got 3, but I needed 4.
Yeah. Should he step down now?
Well, yes, I think he should, and I think the burden now on both the president and my colleagues on the Republican side is to ensure that his successor is a competent individual dedicated to the Constitution and not to the president.
How much of these reports about kind of chaos at the Pentagon begin to seep up to the White House? Because I think Hegseth's been the lightning rod, but you look at what's going on down the ranks, and you know you've served. That gets to be pretty serious.
Well, absolutely. It's chaotic there now. He just fired, without any rationale, 3 advisors who he's known for years. They claim that they were thrown out without any proof of anything they did wrong. They claim they did nothing wrong. His chief publicist, who wrote an editorial this weekend, said, "Oh, he's a wonderful guy. I love him, but he should be fired."
There have been reports that they might quietly give more responsibility to Deputy Defense Secretary Feinberg. What do you think of that idea?
It's a very bad idea. Feinberg is a very talented, no, it's true. He's a talented individual, but his job is to essentially run the building. All of the administration, all of the logistics, all those things, where the Secretary of Defense has an overwhelming job to be the chief advisor to the president, communicating with all the COCOMs, all the commanders across the globe of what's the strategy, what do we do, how do I integrate with other countries and their militaries, and to put those tasks on the deputy secretary. He's already working probably 24/7. It's impossible.
Meanwhile, Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency has set a loose target of slashing as many as 200,000 jobs from the Pentagon's civilian workforce of 750,000. So, Representative, what would that do to the Pentagon's ability to fulfill its mission?
Well, these arbitrary targets and numbers that we've seen come out of DOGE reflect nothing but back of the envelope math about trying to make a headline and please Donald Trump. Unless it's evidence-based, unless we are focused on working with Congress in a real way, I would be happy to look at waste, fraud, and abuse. But let's be very clear. This pursuit of efficiency gets revised over and over again. They put things up on websites. They take them down. They can't account for any of the savings. So it is not an intellectual exercise to simply put out some numbers unless there's something backing it. And look, we've got great leaders in Congress who want to hold our institutions accountable. Let's work together, not give the richest guy in the world whatever he wants, knowing whatever contracts he may have and conflicts of interest we won't know because he's a special government employee who does not have to file financial disclosures. That's bad.
Senator, the president launched tariff wars against virtually all of our trading partners, and that's on again, off again. It's reeled the markets. You're not quite sure what's going on day to day. What is that effect is going to have on Rhode Island's economy? We have tourism. We see nationally that a lot of people are canceling trips.
Right.
We rely on tourism, the state's pension fund, all of that. What is the direct effect of those tariffs going to have in Rhode Island?
Well, the first effect will be inflation for products that we depend upon, groceries, other products. Then you'll see our industries begin to slow down because the supply chain will be more expensive or even not available. That'll cause layoffs because you don't need people when you're doing half the business and half the production you did last year. We import a lot of cars into the United States. Foreign cars now are being heavily taxed. My sense is where the market works, they're not going to be as numerous as in the past year when we were moving cars in here. It's going to have a ripple effect, and then it's going to affect our state budget and our cities and town budgets because they're going to have to make up the gap. One example, not tariff example, but they've taken the EDA program from the Department of Education, which deals with disabled children. They moved it into the Department of Health and Services and Bobby Kennedy. At the same time, they're cutting 20,000 people from that department. So you have a completely new program that no one has any experience with there. And then you're creating chaos by cutting 20,000. That is just going to cause complications and complications. And, so it will affect everyone very quickly, and it will be, it's one thing to pick one thing and mess it up, but when you pick everything and mess it up deliberately, then you've got a real problem on your hands.
So the Trump administration is dismantling the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, and that's had an impact here in Rhode Island, where Adesia Nutrition has laid off workers amid stop work orders and delayed payments for the food it provides to starving children. The Trump administration says it reviewed foreign aid programs and found that many are not in the national interest. Your response, Senator?
They're definitely in national interest, and I'll tell you, we had Admiral Paparo, the commander of the Pacific Fleet, Indo-PACOM, before our committee, and I asked him directly, what's the impact of the cuts to USAID? He said, sir, we have no presence in the South Pacific unless we have USAID, our NGOs and our Peace Corps people, and without that soft power, our hard power is not as credible or as effective. It is a national security issue, and it's ridiculous in terms of saying it has no effect. The PEPFAR program started by George W. Bush for AIDS in Africa. It has helped keep alive hundreds of thousands of people. Without it, and it's been cut, those people will die.
And I think a lot of us didn't realize the far reach of USAID. I'm sure that, look, there is some waste, and I think they've gone in and identified some of that. But you see Adesia, which gets so much bang for the buck with American-made product. What have you learned about USAID? Because you're a newer congressman.
Yeah, and I serve on the Foreign Affairs Committee. So USAID is under our purview. And when you think about America's interests, it's twofold. We know our values. And if we're going to lead the world, it is important that we prioritize making sure that starving children don't die. I can think of nothing more aligned with our values, but the heartlessness we've seen from President Trump, the weakness from Secretary Rubio, the arbitrary cuts again from Elon Musk leave us in a position where around the world, our allies are saying, don't trust the U.S., they won't be there. And you know what? China's going to come in and say, well, we can fill this void. And so when you think about the continent of Africa, which is going to see a big withdrawal from this administration, where 1 in 4 people on this planet will be from in the coming decades, where there will be a great opportunity not only for our values, but for our markets and for the future of the globe, and we have a big, major withdrawal. What is America first about that? That's America last.
Yeah, they say they're shifting some of the programs to the State Department, but what's the impact, like in Sudan right now, today?
Starving babies. There was just a piece in the Atlantic just a few days ago showing that you can sort of count the days that these babies will live. And so that again, when you look at USAID, it's not just feel good. It's about America's place in the world. And this is consistent with the authoritarian streak that we've seen from Donald Trump, which is he wants these countries to come to his doorstep and beg. And that's not okay.
Senator, you're a graduate of Harvard Law and the Kennedy School of Government. Harvard seems to be in the president's crosshairs these days. We've heard, and that's not the only Ivy League school, but Harvard particularly, because they've stood up to him, which has infuriated him even more, threatening billions of dollars and potentially tax-exempt status. That seems like a bit of a far reach, but as a Harvard grad, how do you react to that?
Well, first, I'm very proud that Harvard stood up. Other people were caving. And here's the problem with President Trump. You give in, and next week he's back asking for more. So both in establishing the principle of the First Amendment rights for an educational institution to pursue knowledge, and again, what Trump's doing is we used to think we had a knowledge economy. He's trying to build an ignorance economy because he's destroying NIH research at these institutions. He's going after some of our best institutions, and it's out of his personal spite, out of his perceived grievances that they will criticize me. But what we have to do is we have to dig in, I think, like Harvard and other schools, and say, no, you can't do this. It's going to be a long legal battle, but I hope and expect will prevail, but it's going to be tough.
Representative, even closer to home, the Trump administration says it will block $510 million for Brown University as part of its push to hold the universities accountable for anti-Semitism. House Speaker Shekarchi, who's championed the state's life sciences efforts, says a cut that deep will have a ripple effect throughout our economy. So your reaction, and what can be done about it?
Well, look, I don't know that Brown has gotten a final word here. But I think we should put this in perspective. These attacks from the Trump administration ripple through not just institutions, but local economies. All of the great work the General Assembly has led on with regard to life sciences could be impacted, right? Remember, these aren't just jobs in labs. There are construction jobs, putting those buildings into the ground. There are jobs that service the entirety of these operations. So this is significant in lots of ways. And I think the response has got to be allyship with institutions across this country. I am proud of the stance that Harvard has taken. I saw a letter come out just today protecting academic freedom and pushing forward that as a virtue that institutions across this country can stand for. And you've seen on the topic of anti-Semitism, you've seen Brown Hillel, along with members of the Brown Corporation, speak to the work that the community has done to combat anti-Semitism, bring unity to the campus, and really build a community where everybody should feel safe academically. And that's got to be the focus.
Congressman, President Trump has called one of Senator Reed's colleagues, Chris Van Hollen, a fool for going down to see Kilmar Abrego Garcia. We've seen this whole play out. It's an administrative error. We can't get him back. Apparently, Trump can, bully Harvard, but he can't pick up the phone to get this guy out. We see how this is going, and eventually the court defined, and it's eventually going to reach the Supreme Court. What concerns do you have, and this is the larger issue, if the court starts ruling against the Trump administration and they kind of brush it off? Do you have concerns about that?
I have deep concerns. I think that puts us in peril. That initiates a constitutional crisis. And that is something that we need every segment of our country speaking to. It can't just be members of Congress. It can't just be people at protests. We need the private sector to not just respond when the bond market is in trouble, but to speak up here, because this erodes the rule of law and erodes our ability to run this country. And so when you eliminate due process, and arbitrarily, it exposes all of us. It says that the president can do whatever he wants.
Senator, the president believes that the country, most of the country, is behind him on immigration. Polling has showed that. The economy, maybe not so much. Are the Democrats right to hang their hat on this specific guy? Is he the guy you really want to, be the poster child for going after? Because he has some issues. Gang membership that they've alleged.
Oh, no. Hey, listen, this goes back to what Gabe has said. This is about our Constitution. Due process applies to anyone who is detained or arrested here in the United States. It's different forms of due process given your status. But this gentleman had no due process. And the idea that he's a gang member and those things, I think that's more of a after-the-fact justification. They didn't know this guy from Adam. They just knew he was not a citizen of the United States. They picked him up at 6 a.m. while he was waiting in front of a Home Depot to go to his job as a union apprentice. He's married. He has 3 children. This is someone who's working in this country.
What about the larger issue of the Supreme Court and the Trump administration?
Here's the issue, and it's very. We have to start building now the clear consensus on both left and right, particularly the right legal scholars, that defying a clear order of the Supreme Court is completely unacceptable, so that Trump does not feel he has that room to maneuver. And if he does do that, the only remedy is an impeachment. But with this Congress, I don't see them gathering the votes. And with 67 votes needed in the Senate, I don't. And Trump is playing on that now. One of the grave errors that were made was when he was impeached for January 6th and he got out of it, he now thinks he has a free pass to do anything. That was a grievous error, and we're paying for it now.
Today is Earth Day, and we're seeing protests against the Trump administration's climate policies. What does the Trump administration mean for attempts to address climate change and to convert to renewable energy? And do you expect the administration to issue an executive order to revoke the tax-exempt status for environmental, social justice, and immigration groups? Senator?
They could do all of that. They've already essentially undercut offshore wind, which is a very promising, not only to relieve us from energy demand, but also in Rhode Island as a very productive manufacturing process for boats and for towers, et cetera. They're doing that. They have complete contempt for the environment. And I would say this goes back to what we read about during the campaign. He had a big soiree with oil executives. He said, listen, I'm going to take care of all this green stuff. Give me $1 billion in campaign contributions. That type of quid pro quo is, let me say, objectionable. And one other point, too. No president, in my understanding, has ever run their businesses out of the White House. He's doing that. He's got a cryptocurrency business. He declares, well, we're going to have a cryptocurrency reserve. What a coincidence. The day the stock market collapsed, he flies to his Mar-a-Lago golf courses around there and hosts the Saudis, who are putting millions of dollars into the tournament, into his pockets. And also, they're all staying in Mar-a-Lago. So we are looking at a president who has, again, no respect for the law in terms of not only social policy, national defense policy, but just his own personal behavior.
Representative, what's your response to the attempts to cut the budget of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration? You mentioned NOAA earlier.
Yeah, so I serve as the top Democrat on the subcommittee of the Environment on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. And so it's an R&D committee. It's about the future. And all the Trump administration wants to do is take us back to the past. When you look at NOAA and think about its future footprint, because of Senator Reid's great leadership, the Atlantic Operations Center, he's slated to be here for 2027, is our ability to map the ocean, to predict storms. But they want to erode every single capacity of that and privatize it, trying to get rid of the National Weather Service. What utility does that provide? We talk about not just predicting storms, but also helping to keep planes in the sky. And they are doing the opposite, making us unsafe. So I'm working pretty vigorously on both NOAA and the National Weather Service. And, my committee is one of those few bipartisan vestiges left. And so I'm going to try really hard to impress on my colleagues the importance of science and making sure that we have not only the agencies doing the work, but we also have the talent, because a lot of the scientists that have been laid off here really imperil our ability to be that predictive value to help anticipate and respond to climate change as we see it.
This question is for both of you. In last election, the elections last fall, President Trump got a greater percentage in virtually every state. He won the popular vote, which he likes to, translate into a mandate. And the Morning Consult latest poll has 43% of Rhode Islanders agreeing with what he's doing. Why do you think the majority of Americans rejected what the Democratic Party was offering last fall? There's been a lot of soul searching, a little bit of navel gazing, and where do we go from here and what's going to be the answer? Why did the American people reject the Democratic message last fall?
And let's just be clear, it wasn't an overwhelming rejection. We're talking 49.8% of the vote to 48.7% of the vote, narrow. Now, I don't think that's an excuse. I'll be very clear. We should win against a multi-time felon, against someone who says, derogatory things about a lot of segments of the population. But I think we ultimately lost because, in many ways, we were talking about an America where folks wanted some sort of difference. They said, I'm working harder than I've ever worked, and I'm not getting ahead. I'm playing hard by the rules. I don't know what's wrong with the system, what's wrong with the structure in which I'm playing by the rules. And so I think those two things are difficult to overcome when you're trying to run virtually a re-election campaign. You're saying, I want to continue in a certain direction. And, at the end of the day, if people don't feel the policies that you put forward, that is a difficult challenge to overcome. Maya Angelou said, people forget what you said, forget what you did, they'll remember how you made them feel. If you aren't feeling good, elections are very emotional. It's how you feel today, but also how you want to feel about the future.
Same question. And did the party drift too far to the left?
I don't think the party drifted too far to the left. I think what happened was that Trump, very cleverly, his campaign, more effectively, frankly, than our campaign, used images, transgender images, et cetera, to try to convince, and they succeeded to an extent, that we're a party that's all we care about. I think on our side, we were trying to impress the voters about, listen, we've had some accomplishments. Our economy is solid, the best in the world. We have a chips program that's going to make us one of the leaders in the world in chip production, not today, but 2 years from now, 3 years from now. We've got an infrastructure program that's rebuilding our highways, giving us more efficiency economically. But as Gabe suggested, that's like a year ahead. That's the future. Climate change, that's a year ahead, et cetera. He seized on immediate issues that could really arouse people. And I say that literally because a lot of his tools were social media tools. And all those elaborate formulas are designed not to impress your intellect, but to trigger your visceral reaction to things. And they did that extremely well. And we were not as competitive in those fields because we have to get there, but we weren't.
So what do? The Founding Fathers had it right where the Senate, you get 6 years, you're running for re-election virtually all the time, right? And so we have midterms coming up in a year and a half. You got this fire hose coming at you every day. What's the long game in terms of getting the message and potentially getting the House back? Maybe the Senate's a little bit more of a challenge. What do you do over the next year and a half? Because it looks right now like the Democratic Party is rudderless. They're getting hit every day, and it's reactive rather than proactive.
Well, I think what you're seeing is, first of all, some of these irrational policies of the administration are beginning to affect real Americans, and they're saying, holy cow. Frankly, we've had 2 town halls in the last week, we had 650 people in Portsmouth last evening, and they're scared because they're looking at Wall Street collapsing, they're looking at the treasuries collapsing, they're looking at trade and tariffs, and that is being internalized. And eventually, I think they'll say, this is no good for me.
Are you at the point of being able to deliver each other speeches at these town halls? Are you that familiar yet?
Well, look, I will always be someone who admires Senator Reed. I said last night at a forum that I first met him when I was 18 years old. I won a program, the United States Senate Youth Program, and I said maybe one day I'll get to work in one of these buildings. And luck has it as that the case right now. But what I would say is to your point about where we're headed, I think we ultimately need to paint a vision of the future. Donald Trump won't be on the ballot, right? He is the past, hopefully. And our message has to be centered on hopefully pain we're able to avert, but also a vision for the future. As a 37-year-old member of the House, I talk about Social Security. You know why I talk about it? Because that's a future I want to have too. And so we have to be focused on what people care about. And that's why if we sound alike, it's because I think we're coalescing. This Dems in disarray thing is really good for cable TV news. It's not necessarily reality.
You mentioned your age. In 2 days, David Hogg, a Parkland High School shooting survivor who's now Democratic National Committee Vice Chair, will be in Rhode Island to back an assault weapons ban. Hogg has said Democrats must end, quote, a culture of seniority politics that lets older, less effective lawmakers hold office at a moment of crisis. Senator, you're a veteran senator. Your response?
Well, I think you have to judge individual candidates based on their performance and their ability to perform going forward. And that judgment is left up to the people who elect you, not vice chairs of the Democratic National Committee or anything else. I think you could look at some people who are middle-aged but are not particularly effective. The issue is effectiveness, and that's what we should be looking at.
And what do you say to those who want to oust Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer?
Well, first of all, I say to them, you've got to step back and give him the time to pull us further together, to make difficult decisions. I've worked with Chuck for years.
So you're not one of those? You're not calling for him to go?
No. I think, the worst thing we can do as Democrats is spend the next year and a half fighting with each other. Yeah. You want to guarantee a Republican triumph in 26? We'll just have these fights about, let's get rid of Chuck, let's do this, let's do that. We have to find a common message, and Gabe has articulated very well. We are for the working class. We are for an information economy. We are investing in the future. We are dealing with climate change because if we don't, your children will be in a very dire position. We have to communicate that, and it's not just the words, it's the technique. It's getting on YouTube. It's communicating through social media, and we've got to do more.
Senator, if you get elected next year, you will be in your early 80s when you leave. Are you having any second thoughts about running next year?
Well,
I know Congressman made you feel old when he was talking about being 18, but we'll go ahead and put it on. We'll put it on the table now. You're not Chuck Grassley, but you're getting on in years.
Well, thank you, Jim. So are you. So
we have aged together.
So are you going to continue to do your show next year?
I don't know that I'm going to be working when I'm 75.
Well, I'm working right now, and I think I intend to keep working because over the course of the years, I've tried to develop insights into the problems that face us. I've also tried to dedicate myself to, as I learned at West Point, selfless service to the nation. And I hope I can continue that. And if I felt that I was anyway physically impaired, I wouldn't. I feel fine.
And Rep, what do you say to those who want to see a new generation of Democrats leading the charge?
We can do both. Well, this is not an either-or thing. Jack Reed is a great mentor to me to understand how to serve Rhode Islanders. And I would not trade that in for the world for rookie experience that hasn't done anything for anybody. And so at the same time, we do need new blood. I'm new to Congress. I've been in Congress 17 months. And I bring a unique perspective, someone who has never had my background in the seat, and you can do both. And so what I would say to the claim that we should just merely throw folks out, I don't listen to them. I say we have to focus on the people we serve. They get to decide. And we should do everything we can to bring new blood in at every level, right? I'm talking about our town councils, our state legislators, everywhere. But that does not mean you sacrifice experience that has done real work for people across this country and here in the state.
Congressman, schools in New England, including Brown and RISD, have reported that nearly 80 students with international visas, they're being revoked. A lot of students come from overseas, and it makes these schools what they are. Is there anything that Congress can do about that?
Look, certainly. And I think this is an area where we should be very thoughtful about that whole comprehensive immigration set of solutions that we have should include how we attract, maintain, and certainly do the opposite of what this administration is doing with the revocation of visas. This will hurt America in the long term. We cannot become a place where foreign students say, I'm going to pass on America. That has made our country great for such a long time. Our innovators, you go to Silicon Valley, you go up 128, you go right here in Providence, and you have international students who have kept our innovation economy flowing. So what Congress can do is be very intentional, and you can be directive in passing legislation to provide for additional student visas. You can do all of that work. Now, the question is, do our Republican colleagues in the House and the Senate have the backbone to stand up to the administration while they do this? Because they do possess specific roles in that immigration process that we don't have unless we pass laws.
The New York Times just wrote that the biggest political rallies anywhere in America right now are being headlined by an 83-year-old Senator, Bernie Sanders.
See, age is popular, right? Right there.
You know,
And-
I didn't write that question.
I rest my case.
And his 35-year-old protege, Representative AOC. Yeah. No one's ever mistaken either of you for Bernie bros. But should Democrats jump aboard the fighting oligarchy tour, Senator?
Well, I think they're raising lots of attention, which is good. I think they're pointing out, as we are this evening, many of the deficiencies in this administration. I think they should keep it up, keep going. Here's what we have to do, though, is we will next year have slates of Democrats that are going into election against Republicans, and we all have to come together. I don't think we can be selective as, well, you know, too old, too young, too this, too that. We need to elect Democrats. And if I think, and I hope that Bernie understands that, but again, it's nice to know that there's an older gentleman in the Senate.
I didn't say you were old. I said you're older. We're aging together. Who do you see emerging in leadership? You have Hakeem Jeffries, who's the minority leader, but on the national level as we look to elections, and what's going to be the message beyond Trump is a tyrant?
Yeah.
You have to offer something. I mean, that's been, beaten over, and the majority of voters, slim majority, rejected that in the elections. What's the message going to be for the Democrats?
Yeah, look, I think leadership is going to find itself in both formal and informal ways, people with titles and without titles. I'd like to think that we will be a party that is inspiring different types of leadership from every segment of the country. And so I want Hakeem Jeffries to be the next Speaker of the House. I'm going to work really hard to do that and travel the country to make that case while trying to maintain my role here. But a thing that I will say about the issues is this is actually one of the things that you raised earlier is how are we going to win? And I do think a focus on tangible policy, housing here in Rhode Island matters, but it also matters across the country, and it's not a red or blue issue. When we look at prescription drug costs, that matters wherever you are in the country. So we have to come up with a discrete set of policies, right, that address needs that people are facing, that are future-oriented and future-focused, and go beyond not just an acronym of legislation, but go to the values that we hold and what we want to bring forth in the future.
So we're going to go to some audience questions in a second here, but before we do, I just saw this story breaking as we
Breaking
came
news.
in.
Oh,
This just in. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will not attend talks in London aimed at ending the war in Ukraine, State Department spokesman said on Tuesday, and earlier saying he planned to travel after he said he was going to go to London. Senator, what do you make of that? What does that tell you, and what should be done?
And unfortunately, it suggests to me that we're abandoning the Ukrainians. And to be blunt, they are fighting our fight. They are sacrificing blood. I've been over there a few times. They are doing remarkable things. And if they lose, Russia, Putin will not be satiated. He will look for more former empire territory to take. And it will set a terrible, terrible, terrible example, because essentially they'll say, well, the Americans will quit. They'll always quit. Just stay long enough. To our Chinese friends, they'll be looking at Taiwan saying, this could be a matter of 2 years. We can live that way.
And Rep, what do you think of this new world order that the Trump administration is shaping?
Yeah, look, it's not America first, it's America last and Putin first, right? This is a willful abdication of responsibility. Our alliances in Europe are frayed. They don't trust us. They are all preparing for a world without us there. Not just a multipolar world, but a world where America is an afterthought. When you have Canada and them running a campaign for the leadership of that country, and they're actively talking about warding off America taking them over, that's scary. And so this is part of a pattern. These aren't one-off incidents. It flows together, and it's scary. And this is what we will continue to be speaking about, and we need our colleagues to join with us in this fight.
All right, we're going to turn to a few questions from members of the audience. Jim.
All right, the first one comes from Margaret Holland McDuff of Family Services of Rhode Island. She asks, what do you predict will be the percentage cut of Medicaid funding to Rhode Island? Senator, let's start with you.
Well, I would hope it's zero, but we're looking at Republicans who in the House have designated $880 billion in cuts to Medicaid, which would devastate our program, all of our programs. Many people don't realize that Medicaid is one of the major sources of support for nursing homes in the state. They assume it's just a bunch of poor people, et cetera. Many people don't realize that 57% of adults on Medicaid are working. They assume, oh, no one works on Medicaid. It's an incredibly important part of our overall healthcare system. So we're going to fight back as much as possible. And I think we can make some progress, because this is not just a Rhode Island phenomenon. Red states have dependency on Medicaid, and other states. And we're trying to use that to get some of our Republican colleagues to say, you can't do that. But, living in this world, you never really get a total victory, like, oh, they won't touch Medicaid. But if we can pull that down to something that could be absorbed, that's a victory.
You want to chime in on that?
Well, look, it depends on how bad they want to hurt us, right? They're looking for $5 trillion in tax cuts. Remember, in the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, 50% of the benefit went to the top 5%. So, it's hard to come up with numbers, and hopefully we're able to overcome them and encourage emergence on the Republican side. But in the worst case scenario, to reach these tax cut goals, they're going to find every way to snip around, and the biggest pot of money is Medicaid.
And you haven't heard on either side during the campaign, Democrats or Republicans talk about the national debt. I mean, you could almost say, look, if these cuts are going to go toward, instead of tax cuts, because it's going to be my kids and my grandkids, you don't hear any discussion about that at all in Washington.
Well, one of the reasons was because we maintained significant national debt. But because we were the world's banker, literally, because the investment in our treasuries was significant by countries all over the world, we were seen as the most stable economy in the world. That's unraveling now. And the deficit becomes more critical, because as it goes up and people aren't willing to buy our treasuries, we're in a big, big problem. And that's why we have to start focusing on both sides of the aisle, programs that do not accelerate the deficit. And the tax cuts they're talking about accelerate it tremendously.
All right, another question. Dr. Pablo Rodriguez, a longtime public health advocate and Latino radio host, asks, health research has suffered a terrible blow during this administration, especially the study of health disparities. What is Congress doing to restore funding for the vital work of studying health disparities and addressing the health of vulnerable communities? Representative.
Well, look, when you look at what they've done to HHS, gut the agency, tens of thousands of people gone, cutting the Office of Minority Health. Seriously, I think about my own family. One of or a couple of my brothers have sickle cell anemia, something that has seen lagging investments. Only recently started to see breakthroughs because we've focused there. So what we have to do is frankly call attention to this. I mean, it's hard. We're in a legislative landscape right now where we don't necessarily have the capacity to pass bills, but we can, if we go through a real appropriations process, and we have a real appropriator here, that we can avert some of that in the blocking and tackling as we put together the FY26 budget. So that's going to be a big part of this.
Senator, what do you say to Dr. Rodriguez?
Well, these cuts are undercutting our economy as well as the health of individual Americans. I mean, we are seeing a situation where if we don't, for example, have effective health care for children, and they have a significant complication, lifetime effects will be far in excess of anything we pay to help in pediatric care. And again, this is the rejection of proven facts about programs that actually, over the long term, save money. And they're doing this not for any type of scientific or cost-benefit basis. This is just part of their program to eliminate DEI, anything that suggests that, you know, we're in favor of diversity, exclusion, and all those things. The irony to me is I don't think they would apply DEI to the draft if we had to draft people again. Because they didn't when I was a kid.
Scott Lyons asks, see, I was young enough just to avoid the draft.
I never registered the draft. I joined the Army at 17.
There you go. Age disparity there. Scott Lyons asks, is impeachment possible? Are you and other Democrats actively seeking dialogue with Republican counterparts to oppose illegal actions by Trump? We talked a little bit about this before, but if you want to answer his question
Well,
directly.
first, impeachment originates in the House of Representatives, and they vote the bill of impeachment. Then the trial is in the Senate, and it takes 67 votes to convict on a bill of impeachment. Right now, frankly, we're not talking about that because that's one topic the Republicans don't want to talk about. And we would have to get changes in both the House and the Senate, I think, to have a reasonable chance to do that. My guess would be if there was a Democratic Congress after the 2026 election, we would get a bill of impeachment. The question would be, can we convince 67 senators to support that? As I said before, January 6th, in retrospective history, was a stunning defeat to our Constitution. If that was not a case of high crimes and misdemeanors, there's nothing. And my Republican colleagues walked away.
What did you think of the January 6th people being pardoned?
Again, an insult to our system of government, an insult to the police officers that died that day, that were beaten that day. It's again, I don't care about the law. I don't care about, it's just, if you're with me, I'll give you everything you need. If you're not, well, I'm going to take away everything you have.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the most astounding images I saw was on Inauguration Day, sitting in that rotunda and watching Capitol Police officers. In many ways, one of the reasons I went was to bear witness to that, because their patriotism triumphs much of what we've seen out of the shameful activities of this administration. But to the topic of impeachment, I think what is even more scary for Republicans in this administration is oversight. So when Democrats win the House back, they don't want to be dragged in front of the House. And we have subpoena power in the House and those committees. So if they don't show up, they're going to spend a night in jail or more.
So let's talk about the midterms, a year and a half away. But really, if people are thinking of running, it's going to be a year away. It's amazing an election's right around the corner, right? Did it seem like you were just running?
17 months ago.
What do you each see on your side? Oh, you can talk about the House and the Senate, but are you confident going into the Democrats can take it back? Or
look, I think we have to articulate a message. The elections don't happen in a vacuum, as everybody knows. We don't necessarily know what the world looks like, but if it stays on this course, I think the American people will speak resoundingly, and Trump will not be on the ballot. When he hasn't been on the ballot, You've seen how poorly they've done. He's this weird, unique historical figure. And so I think we have to have quality candidates. We have to deliver an effective message that is about a rebuke to this administration, but again, about the future. And I think we can't leave any segment of the population behind. We have to talk to young people. We have to go to every nook and cranny on whether it's TikTok or Instagram or you name it, podcasts, Joe Rogan, everybody.
Podcast.
Yeah, so we got just like this
podcast.
And so we have to go directly to people, and we have to be authentic. And so I think we will do well, but it doesn't happen on its own.
It seems like the Senate's a little bit more nuanced, and you know the chessboard better than we do about who's coming up in 26 as opposed to 24 and then 28. Is it ripe for the picking for some Democrats, or does it look pretty good for the Republicans right now to maintain seats?
I think we're in a situation where we have better opportunities this cycle than last cycle. And the only evidence we have, real evidence of what the landscape looked like, in my estimation, is the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. Huge amounts of money coming in. Elon running around saying, I'll give you $1 million. I'll give you every day $1 million. A state that Trump carried significantly, and the Democratic Supreme Court candidate won. The turnout of Democrats was way above expectation. And that means in that race we were able to connect, and we were able to communicate, I think, not only our plans going forward, but also I think there was a lot of, my God, this country's going in a handcart, and we got to stop it. And I think we'll have both of those, I hope, synchronized messages. Country is going in the wrong direction, and we have better ideas going forward. And, again, I think that in Wisconsin, it's not the be-all and end-all, but it sent a really strong signal to everybody.
Last audience question, Ellen and Stu Smith ask, what is the best and most effective way for us to advocate? Representative?
Look, I think it's showing up, being in community with others. And like you said, elections are coming around the corner. There are lots of ways to activate. And so, picking up those phones, if you have the capacity to go to those states, that is going to matter. And then to advocate, I think sharing in your networks real information. We are living in an atmosphere of disinfo and misinfo that's never existed before. So being that vessel, we all got a social network that is both online and offline. Deploying all of those tools, I think, is a step towards the advocacy that we need.
Senator?
I think we have to focus on red states. So if people here in Rhode Island have friends, family in Tennessee and Kentucky, contact them, as Gabe suggests, with the facts. I think we have to assist that effort, because I think we, the Democratic National Committee, has to put together a website where you can go and say, Trump said X, but that's wrong. This is the facts from a reputable source. And if we can start communicating that to people all over the country, that's the antidote to some of the disinformation. But also, it reinforces, asking simple questions. What's the price of eggs down there in Arkansas today? Oh, gee, wasn't he going to fix that? I mean, I don't want to be too clever, but just reaching out to places which are either purple or red.
Senator Reed, Representative Amo, thank you for joining us today. Let's give him a big round of applause. Rhode Island Report is a production of the Boston Globe in collaboration with Rhode Island PBS. Be sure to follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen.
And please join us right back here Fridays at 7 or Sunday at noon for a lively experiment. We archive all of our shows at ripbs.org/lively.